Hello and welcome to In Progress. I am Raymond Perez. We're back from our July break and ready to talk politics. Of course, we don't have time for a theme song today because Andrew Cuomo is in very big trouble. So, New York Attorney General Letitia James' investigation found that Cuomo engaged in a lot of different activities, none of them very good. So, unwanted and inappropriate groping, kissing, hugging, and comments that accusers called deeply humiliating, uncomfortable, offensive, and inappropriate. That comes from Axios. Cuomo and his staff took steps to retaliate against at least one former employee for coming forward with her story and fostered a toxic workplace that enabled sexual harassment to occur. Okay, so that's the lead-in. We're actually going to be talking about the New York Times article. Assembly Speaker says governor can no longer remain in office. Now, to be clear, this is a New York Times Live, so there is no author, or there are many authors, rather. But if you know me, you know I like the New York Times Live pieces. Okay, so although we are talking about the New York Times Live article, I am actually going to switch to gears and not really mention it. So the first thing to know is New York Attorney General Letitia James has a storied history with Andrew Cuomo. Letitia James was actually, I believe, talked about for governor in a very real way by the media after Cuomo would leave office. The issue with that is that I don't believe there are term limits in the New York gubernatorial system. And because there are no term limits, Letitia James would not have won, in all likelihood, in 2022 if she had ran for governor. Now, she was very well positioned to run for governor. Of course, she was the Attorney General, or she is rather the Attorney General of New York. She is an African-American woman, which is important as well. She would have had a big boon in the mainstream press because she would have been going after disgraced former President Donald Trump, who is, of course, not very loved in New York despite living there, or having lived there, rather, and being associated with the New York City real estate scene. So if you put that aside, it becomes a lot more clear that Letitia James would have probably ran for governor. So is there a conflict of interest in Letitia James' Attorney General finding? I'm not necessarily sure there is, because Letitia James herself was a ally of Cuomo. Of course, that alliance was always fraught, as most of Cuomo's political alliances were, but it seems as if Letitia James probably won't run in 2022 either way, given the obviously horrible optics that she would get from taking down the beloved Governor Andrew Cuomo. And he really was beloved, despite a lot of the issues that resulted from the nursing home scandal, the various other scandals that had emerged during his time as governor. Governor Cuomo was not necessarily as popular as he seemed before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, you really did see a real increase in his approval. So now you're beginning to see a major backlash against Governor Cuomo, and it's coming from a lot of different people. So the first really dominoes to fall were the state assembly and the state senators, and then from there, it really did increase into a massive wave. So let's first look at a few of the people who are calling for him to resign. Basically, the entire New York congressional delegation is calling for him to resign. Both New York Senators Chuck Schumer and Kirsten Gillibrand, who, of course, Kirsten Gillibrand, one of the most famous senators, the first senator, I believe, to call for Franken's resignation, a very strong advocate for feminism in the Senate. And Gillibrand, I believe she actually called for him to resign a little bit before, maybe in March of 2021, she called for him to resign when the allegations were first coming out. But a lot of the other senators, I think Schumer actually joined Gillibrand in that, but a lot of the other senators were not calling for him to resign. And we covered that then. I believe that was one of our first shows. No, it wouldn't have been because it was March. But it was one of our shows that we actually did at JHU that we did live. But regardless, we covered that at some point then. But now it's much more important what's happening because it seems like Cuomo probably is going to be pushed to resign. Now, does that mean that he will resign? Actually, let me first cover a few more names. Basically, the entire New York delegation from the Democrats. So you even have Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Jerry Nadler, Jamal Bowman, Richie Torres, Mondaire Jones, a lot of different progressive senators. as well as the moderate senators, as you mentioned with Jerry Nadler and a few of the others. So let's actually continue moving from there. Basically, you have a lot of the state representatives and state senators saying that they may move to impeach him, which would be very bad for Cuomo, obviously. It's unlikely that he would survive an impeachment vote, in my opinion, in my estimation. Although, at the moment, you only have around 80 to 90 senators, 80 to 90 representatives saying that they would vote to impeach him. But here at In Progress, as you know, we like to look at the levers of power and who moves the levers of power. So we need to look at the majority leader and the speaker, because in most legislative bodies, the person who really does the work of, moving the body is the majority leader and the speaker. So Senate Majority Leader Andrea Stewart-Cousins came out with a statement that said that the various allegations are drawing away from the business of government. She says that we need to govern without daily distraction, and for the good of the state, Governor Cuomo must resign. So that's a big deal. Of course, when the Senate Majority Leader is saying that you need to go, well, and the Senate Majority Leader, to be clear, is from his own party, and there's a supermajority of Democrats, you might start thinking, okay, I might need to resign instead of getting impeached and removed, because the Senate Majority Leader is saying, you need to go, right? And she has the power, possibly, to get him out, basically. So unless Cuomo can really use his leverage, which it seems like he's getting vanishingly little, his political capital has degraded, his own people, frankly, are going against him. And that is a major issue if you're Andrew Cuomo, because at that point you may not survive. You may not survive, of course, impeachment and removal. So let's look at what the Assembly Speaker says. Assembly Speaker is actually a little bit more charitable to Cuomo, but he does say that he agrees with the Senate Majority Leader in terms of the sentiment, but he does not outright call for Cuomo's resignation. However, regardless, he is still going to allow the Judiciary Committee to launch an impeachment investigation. So this is the beginning, an impeachment inquiry, right? Remember, this happened with Trump. This happened with Trump twice, frankly. This happened with Clinton. You start an impeachment inquiry in the Judiciary Committee, and then the Judiciary Committee might refer that out of the committee, or it might do whatever it wants to do with that impeachment proceeding. But that's very serious if you're Cuomo. Even bigger is Joe Biden saying that Joe Biden, of course, being the lead of the Democratic Party, the head of the Democratic Party, in a presidential democracy like the United States, the head of the Democratic Party, or the head of the party in power, is the president. And the president isn't of the party. Maybe it's a speaker, maybe it's a minority leader, maybe it's a majority leader of the Senate. Regardless, it is Joe Biden at this point for the Democrats. And Joe Biden is a moderate Democrat. Andrew Cuomo is a moderate Democrat. But Joe Biden is still calling on Cuomo to resign. And this is important because, well, number one, let's take a step back and remember in June of 2020 when it could have been June, it may have been May, may have been April even, when the Tara Reade allegation came out. If you don't remember the Tara Reade allegation, it was the allegation of sexual assault, if not rape, against the president, the current president, former presidential candidate, and vice president at the time, or former vice president at the time, Joe Biden. So that allegation was extremely disqualifying in the eyes of many Democrats, despite the fact, of course, that Donald Trump had many of his own allegations. But regardless, it was seen as disqualifying, potentially extremely disqualifying, had it been found to be true, or had an investigation even found any merit to it. That was really the low point of Vice President Biden's campaign. And there was a lot of talk in the media that Andrew Cuomo could replace Joe Biden. And of course, I don't believe that Joe Biden would like that. Of course, Joe Biden being one of the most stubborn or proud people in politics, not saying anything about Joe Biden, I'm just saying something that I believe to be true. I think that Joe Biden is a fine president, but it is true that he is a fairly proud person. He ran for president like 4 times. This was his go. And a lot of the discussion of Joe Biden, mentally declining, which turned out to be really total BS. A lot of the discussion of Joe Biden being this walking zombie. And then, of course, you have the sexual assault allegation. And Cuomo then appears as someone who can save the Democratic Party and defeat Donald Trump. So there was an issue of replacing Biden with Cuomo at the convention. So Biden, of course, would not like that. And as a result, you may see Biden go against Cuomo, as he did. It wasn't today, but it was within the last week, where Biden said that Cuomo should probably resign. Now, you need to really think about this impeachment proceeding as a lot of politics coming into play. Although it does definitely seem like Andrew Cuomo did commit impeachable offenses, and he did commit sexual harassment, the question really now becomes whether the Democrats will hold him accountable for that. And generally, politicians of their own party do not hold their party accountable. That just seems, a lot of people claim that for Republicans, and it's possible to say that for Democrats. Now, of course, the Republicans are much worse with it, but the Democrats should impeach Governor Cuomo if they really believe in the values that they claim to believe in. Now, that being said, politics is a lot of power, a lot of playing about power, really. And as a result, there is an argument that the Democrats should not impeach Governor Cuomo, but to me that seems to fall flat. I think that the governor should be impeached. I think that there won't be that many repercussions from an impeachment proceeding in the House and a removal in the Senate. It doesn't seem to me that he's going to resign, but hopefully he does, at least for the good of the party. And if he does resign, we have Kathy Hochul as his lieutenant governor who will step up. Kathy Hochul has actually been pretty distanced from Governor Cuomo ever since the allegations came out in the first place. And she isn't calling for his impeachment or resignation, primarily because she's a lieutenant governor, and that would be crazy, like if Pence called for Trump to be impeached, because, of course, there's a conflict of interest there. But there is a chance that Hochul, who would be the first female governor, who would be the first governor from outside of New York City in over a century, that Hochul becomes the governor after Cuomo resigns or is removed. Of course, we will always be looking at Cuomogate because it is developing fairly quickly, so we will continue to cover it as it develops. Subscribe to In Progress on YouTube for more, and tell me whether you think the Democrats should impeach Governor Cuomo if he doesn't resign. Do you think that he even will resign? Of course, tell me below. Next, we'll discuss the Republicans' latest move against abortion.